what did you think about that verdict?
You know, it's been a long, hard fought 2 weeks. A lot of fights in the battle, in the courtroom, a lot of battles in the courtroom. I'm very tired. But really, this case is about Christina Parcell. She was brutally murdered by Zach Hughes, and we proved it. And this was a very emotional trial, because you rarely have a defendant get on the stand and detail such a heinous crime and a justification that makes no sense. And that was very emotional for us, very emotional for the jurors, very emotional for the courtroom. And we're just glad that this jury did what they did. And they got some sort of justice for Christina and her family, especially her sister, Tina Parcell, who's been through so much. And Tina said it so well. She said it better than anybody could in the courtroom about the impact this has had on her and her life and what he did to her sister. So we hope that this gives them some solace, some justice, a sense of healing in which they can move on. But there's no winners today. Everybody lost something in that courtroom today. And that's very sad. However, my duty is to make sure this county is safe, and that people are safe from people that commit crimes like Zach Hughes. And today we accomplished that.
Well, the defense also just made a statement that saying they're going to appeal this case, as has been read into the record several times. There was a lot of proffers, a lot of testimony without the jury in place. Do you believe that appeal will move forward?
You know, after 2 weeks of trial, I'm sure there are some appealable issues. But I'll tell you this, the judge did an excellent job analyzing the law. We were very deep in analyzing the law. My co-counsel, Jake Hoffer, did a fantastic job digging in and analyzing complex legal issues all along the way. The defense attorneys did an excellent job protecting the record. And so everything is protected. Everything is going to be ready for the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court to review. And of course, we will take whatever analysis they take. But I feel that the prosecution put together a very strong, clean, legally clean case.
You know, well, they say that trials are a search for the truth. Do you think the jury got that today, or during this trial?
I think so. I think they got it in a very emotional way. And I think I think it was very difficult for them to listen to the kind of testimony that they had. To listen to my closing statement was hard. To listen to the violence, the deprivation that Christina Parcell suffered was very hard. And there's a lot of other avenues involved in this trial. But for this trial, it was about Zach Hughes murdering Christina Parcell. That's what the trial was about the entire time. And that's what we kept this trial to. And that was the jury's decision to determine whether Zach Hughes, with malice aforethought, killed Christina Parcell, and they found that he did.
But do you think that the verdict would have been any different had they heard about the trial plan and the charges that Bradley Post was facing?
I don't think they will ever hear about that, because the relevance of any of that, and as you heard Tina Parcell described, John Mello has done so much to Christina Parcell. Brad Hughes has done so much to Christina Parcell. And Zach Hughes did the ultimate thing to Christina Parcell.
The defense mentioned a couple of times they didn't believe enough evidence was presented by you guys in the case. What were your thoughts when they kept saying that?
You know, that's what they're supposed to say. They got to represent their client. They got to zealously represent their client. They had a very difficult defense to pursue. And it was sort of a novel defense based on the exclusion of a lot of evidence. And I believe they did the best they could.
And while you said in your closing statement that you yourself didn't expect Zach Hughes to take the stand in the way he did, talk us through what was going through your mind as a solicitor. Take us through that process as you hear Zach explaining what detail, step by step, what he did out there.
The only time I've had a person explain a violent murder was in one of the first trials that I had, and that person admitted to it, pled guilty to it, and then described what her co-defendant was doing. And it was hard, and it was gruesome. I've never had a defendant get on the stand with the kind of attitude, ego, cold-faced sternness, and explain a brutally murder in the way that he did it. It shook me a little bit, his testimony, I'm not gonna lie. My legal mind was analyzing everything, what he was saying and what he was doing. So the professional side of me was in a little bit of shock as well, because it didn't make a lot of sense to me, because he was giving the prosecution so much to work with. It's my understanding, based on what he said, he was giving me the truth that was in his head at the time.
But you could have crossed him, for as long as you could, if you wanted to.
Certainly.
But you only asked him one question.
Certainly.
And why did you ask him that question?
That was a strategic decision, a very much strategic decision. And as you know, he couldn't follow the rules inside the courtroom. And so he wasn't gonna follow the rules with me either. And he wanted to have a moment of conversation with me. There was no doubt about it. And I felt that he wanted to say what he wanted to say. And if it meant potentially getting convicted, he was willing to do that. And if that was the exchange for me not being able to cross-examine him, because I had a lot of cross-examination, we could have gone on for days, cross-examinations that I wanted to ask him. But that was not my goal. My goal was not to go face-to-face with Zach Hughes. That's not my job. My job is to sustain convictions, keep the people of Greenville County safe, and protect victims, and get them some justice. And so I made a strategic decision to do just that.
During sentencing, we heard some pretty emotional statements from the sister of Christina Parcell and also from the father of Zachary Hughes. Can you describe your emotions as you heard those statements being spoken in the courtroom?
I thought Tina Parcell did a fantastic job explaining the impact that this has had on her life. It has been a major impact to her. I think we forget about her niece, who's been very impacted by all of this stuff. I think she's now 12 or 13 years old, so she's suffered a lot in her very young age. And I'm not gonna comment on the comments made by Zach Hughes' father.
Well, what about Mr. Mello now? Do you need Zach Hughes to prosecute Mr. Mello?
Well, I have his testimony, so I already have Zach Hughes. He has already stated under oath certain things that Mr. Mello did in relation to the murder of Christina Parcell. And so Mr. Mello has been charged with solicitation of a felony and accessory before the fact of murder. And we will be continuing to build that case and start preparing it for trial.
There was a lot of detectives going on during the trial, or trying to just keep it towards the judge's ruling. What would I like for prosecutors to just kind of keep the ball rolling during the trial?
The judge makes rulings. The judge decides what can and can't be heard by a jury, because his role is to have a fair trial, and that is what his role is, and that's what he did. And so he has to make legal rulings that are sometimes difficult, and the defense and the prosecution have to adhere to those rulings. Those are the rules that I live under in that courtroom. But we also have to monitor each other and make sure when they violate those rules, or they attempt to violate those rules, or might go violate those rules, then we have to object, and they get to object too, and then the judge has to make those rulings, and we went along. When there's a lot of objections going on, it oftentimes makes it difficult, keep you off your feet a little bit, but that's just part of the way the courtroom works, and that's what we're trained to do.
So what would you say to somebody that, or people that might be thinking that you kind of hit the ball a little bit?
We didn't have the ball at all. There's no hiding the ball. If you want to talk about excluded evidence, it was excluded for a reason. And there was a really good reason to exclude that, because it had nothing to do with this trial. Now, the defendant may have wanted it to be something in this trial, but it had no business in this trial because it was not related to this trial. And that's what the judge ruled, that it was not relevant. And they don't know what that evidence is, and they don't know the full story of all of that evidence. Now, as you all very know, Brad Post has been charged with a multitude of crimes, and he's being prosecuted by the Attorney General's office, and they will continue to prosecute Brad Post for those crimes.
Do you believe if that was introduced and his outbursts, do you believe that that testimony could be used against Brad Post if that had been entered into testimony today?
The information about Brad Post?
Yes, the information about the child porn and the alleged sexual abuse.
And I can't answer that question because it was not introduced in this trial. And those are crimes that Brad Post is going to have to stand for.
So why aren't you prosecuting?
The Attorney General's office typically prosecutes around the state child pornography cases. And those are the kind of crimes that Brad Post has been charged with. And so they prosecute those in South Carolina, those in Greenville all the time. In addition, I was prosecuting Zach Hughes, so it just made it easy that he was prosecuting Brad Post. They're two totally separate cases.
So part of the reason that Zach Hughes said that you murdered Christina was he attempted to get investigators to look into her case. Do you feel the system failed in some way, and that's why we're here?
Absolutely not. There were multiple investigations into these families. And there are lots of other ways in which to report alleged crimes, to try to do things in an effort to protect children. But I know one way that you're not supposed to do it, and that's to break into their house and stab them 35 times. And so the sort of sense of vigilante justice that Zach Hughes discussed on the stand just isn't allowed in South Carolina or the country. And we're not going to stand for it here, and if you engage in that, we're going to prosecute you to the full extent of the law.
Mr. Wilkins, Lutina said last night that Christina always thought this may happen to her. Is there anything that the Solicitor's Office or Greenville County Sheriff's Office could have done maybe to have prevented this from happening to Christina Parcell?
Not that I'm aware. You heard the premeditation involved in this particular murder. Without prior knowledge of it, they were very scared of John Mello, and they've said that, but they didn't know Zach Hughes existed. They believed that John Mello was in Italy, and he was, but they didn't know he had a co-conspirator here lying in waiting. I'm not sure how you defend against that.
Is there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't ask you?
You always ask me that question. You know, it's a hard question to answer, other that I think the justice system worked today. I think trials are supposed to be hard and long. The state is supposed to be challenged by the defense, and then you proceed forward, and the result is what the result is. And I think the right result was done today, and we're satisfied with it.
I do have one more question. We heard on the stand that basically we're looking at all of the images, and at some point there were so many they stopped looking. Will your office continue to look and identify victims in these images?
That has already been done by the Crimes Against Children unit at the Sheriff's Department. They always continue to do that, and that is directly related to Brad Post's case.
And well, is your office going to be involved at all in the daughter's, well-being from this point forward?
Sure, so our office doesn't have anything to do with that. That'll be Department of Social Services, Family Court. I believe Tina Parcell mentioned that, they've already got hearings and those types of things, scheduled. But, fortunately for me, that is outside the scope of my authority and my realm, and I'm just fine about that.
Thank you.
Thank you all, appreciate it.